So today I'll be reading from The Most Precious Gift, and I'll be reading the talk, Not Clinging to Anything in the World, offered on November 24th, 2014. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasami. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the phrase independent, not clinging to anything in the world, refers to the full opening, the full completion of the practice. As with any phrase, you get some understanding, but perhaps not the correct one. That's the trouble with words. We think they mean something. For a start, this is a translation from the Pali. Every translation carries its particular nuances, and sometimes it misses the nuances in the original. The Pali is probably not the original either. It's a constructed language, but very close to what the Buddha spoke. Upadana is the Pali word for clinging, and it means feeding on, adopting, taking as a basis, identifying with. The Buddha was great at using these striking and vivid words such as clinging. It's a graphic, felt experience. It's not an abstract sense. Clinging gives you the sense of something that is unnecessary and a bit desperate. The Pali word for the world is loka. It doesn't really refer to planet Earth. When we think of not clinging to anything in the world, we might think that it refers to daily life, business, politics, economics, and so forth. And we should therefore ignore all those. But that doesn't seem to be what the Buddha meant. He himself taught kings and ministers. He gave advice on political matters and ethics, and even gave advice to businessmen about the best way to conduct their affairs. He certainly wasn't shutting all that off. So the world here doesn't mean planet Earth. It doesn't mean a particular sphere of activities. It means something further reaching and more profound. The world is our domain, our concerns, our entire personal world. Very often, this is mapped out as the world of the sense bases. Sights, sounds, touches, tastes, fragrances, and thoughts construct the world, don't they? The basic signals of our eyes construct a three-dimensional world. In fact, it's not really three-dimensional because we don't see distance, we infer it, and we don't do it deliberately. It happens by itself. I can recognize that you're not 2 inches high, but 4 feet high, sitting far away from me. The combination of the eye and the brain creates distance, space, dimensionality. It generates a visual world that we seem to live within. The auditory world is different because it doesn't infer space. You can get it roughly by the volume, but that sound could be an insect buzzing close by, or it could be an airplane 3 miles away. When you hear a sound, the sense data is transferred to the brain, which relates it to a pre-existing reference. What is that? What is it like? What does it remind me of? That's what we call perception, and that happens instinctively. Sometimes you can see the mind wondering, what is that? For a moment before you get it. So essentially, the world is an experience which is constructed through our sense doors. We don't do it deliberately. It just happens if the sense doors are functioning properly. Of course, they don't always function properly. People can have hallucinations, disease, or neurological damage, and suddenly their world becomes a strange place. If the chemistry in the brain changes, we receive different emotional tones. We might feel frightened of things just because something in our brain has changed. I heard of an interesting example of that. A man had a neural problem. The nerves associated with his eyes were properly connected to the synapses connected to the emotional centers in his brain, but the ones associated with his ears were not. A situation came about where his mother phoned him, and as she was talking, he was thinking, "Who is this woman pretending to be my mother?" Because he could hear her voice, but didn't get the emotional sense. Then he went to see his mother and said, "Hello, Mom. There was a strange woman who sounded just like you talking to me on the phone." Because he didn't get that emotional nuance, he didn't recognize the voice as hers. When you see something, the brain also throws its own piece onto it. Familiarity, attractiveness, ease, friendship, hostility, or threat. The world is constructed. The Pali word abhisankara means deeply constructed. The word sankara appears very often in the scriptures and is rather complex. It means constructed, fabricated, formed. The world is a formed, constructed experience, and the senses in that construction generate the perception that I'm here and the world is out there around me. I'm separate from it. But try to find out where you are in this body. If you were to cut one of these bodies open, you would see that there's nobody inside it. Nobody is living behind your eyes. Nobody is living up in your head. Where are you? The sense of self is constructed, and based upon that construction, all kinds of attitudes and reflexes occur. That's called clinging. It's been adopted, taken as solid and real. Within the sense world, the nuances of separation, me and here, and other people and other things out there, generate all kinds of interesting and tense signals such as loss, gain, approval, disapproval, uncertainty, threat. Around these signals, body reflexes kick in. You tense up, you reach out, you try to get. You deeply want to be bonded to, you want to find your place in. In what? You're in it. But your world is now also being constructed through the sense of loss, the sense of separation, the sense of not belonging. The sense doors will always generate that sense of you're outside of it, and yet you're also deeply affected by it. You're neither completely in it nor completely out of it. You're on the edge, with things pouncing into you and the possibility of reaching out. That's a precarious position. It gets us very edgy. All those nuances are not created through the sense doors alone, but also through the link up to the brain, to the mind, to the heart, to the things we've learned, acquired, and adopted. We have the impression of gaining something which we take on. But what are you gaining actually? Do you really have anything? Do you have a car? What do you mean you have it? Do you go to bed with it? Does it come running after you? Is it welded to your skin? What happens in 6 years' time when you buy a new one? Has something in you died? What makes you think you had it? With the sense of separation, there's a very strong wanting to bond to something, to find ourselves, to feel stable, but you can't have any of it. Some people might think, I don't want a car, I want a person. That would be much better. Can I have a person, please? And preferably the right one. Well, that's going to be a real game because I'm getting these perceptions, nuances, and impressions, and she's getting these perceptions, and they're probably completely different. You don't have, but you exist with. You interact and mesh. It works. It works, and you learn something, but you don't have anything. And when you don't have anything, you also don't lose anything. That's the beauty of it. That's what independent means. It doesn't mean there's nothing there. It just means that these impressions of gaining and belonging, which are deeply embedded because of the sense of separation, don't have to be inferred. They don't have to happen. Therefore, the psychologies of needing, grasping, and holding don't have to happen. Everything is fluid. It comes and goes. Nothing is held. We need to really drink in that perception of impermanence. These messages, these signals, these impressions don't change at the drop of a hat just by understanding the word. You have to learn it very deeply. because the sense of separation which the sense stores create is so poignant for people. This is a very difficult trigger to undo. In that sense of separation, we feel quite lost, alone, rejected. It's very painful, so we want to hold. You don't stop clinging by saying, don't do it, or it's wrong to do it, or you're stupid for doing it. It doesn't happen that way. In fact, this is the worst thing to do. They did that to babies for a time. People were raising children for millennia, doing perfectly well, and then somebody decided that they had figured out a better way to do it. They thought that once you have a baby, you shouldn't let them sleep with their parents because it creates an unhealthy bonding. So all these poor little babies were put in cots in another room, and they totally freaked out because they were not getting the sense that there's somebody there for them, which is what it takes to get over being born, being separate. We can't cut clinging like that because, in fact, we don't cling deliberately. The adopting of things is a basic response. You only get weaned off through finding a sense of refuge, security, safety, and fulfillment somewhere else. You can't find refuge in the world, in the constructed, because the constructed can never be safe. The real safety is in the unconstructed, and we can recognize that it's already here. We don't have to keep creating it and getting it going. This is a synopsis of the Buddha's teaching. Quote, "There is an unconditioned, unborn, unconstructed, uncreated. That's the best place to be. This is where the world dissolves." As read in the suttas, you don't reach the end of the world by traveling. I would also say that you don't reach the end of the world by rejecting it. You reach the end of the world by noticing its arising and ceasing in your awareness. One expression of the world is the sense fields, so notice the nuances that occur when sights, sounds, or touches pass through. Is it desirable, undesirable, interesting, boring? Try to persist with mindfulness, acknowledging those signals and staying steady. What stays steady through them is the door to the deathless. There can be any degree of supervision, reflection, non-reaction, non-hostility to the flushing and flooding of the world. The fact that this is possible is an indication that every one of us has the door to the deathless half open, and the Buddha is just saying, I invite you to open it wide and walk right in. The practice is like learning to swim. First you stick your toe in, then your foot, your leg, then you wade in, have a splash around. It takes time before you have a sense of trust in it. That's totally healthy, because if you don't practice in a progressive, trusting way, your capacity for sustained, dispassionate awareness does not develop adequately to keep you floating in that space, and then you can go very strange and flip out. Signals may come rushing through your system, hour after hour. Why doesn't he ring the bell? I've been sitting here for 3 hours. My knees are killing me. I'm going to die. I'm depressed. I'm going mad. I'm going to starve to death. Because you're no longer in your known world, in your familiar place where you can organize and arrange things in a way that suits your preferences and gives you comfort. So everything starts going towards orange alert. In the Contemplation of Feelings section of the Satipatthana Sutta, we read worldly feeling and non-worldly feeling. Here, the word world has a different meaning. The equivalent Pali words are samisa and niramisa, which mean roughly that which is associated with flesh and that which is not associated with flesh. Flesh has an interesting capacity called touch, and it generates feeling. The visual sense and the auditory sense don't generate feeling. They have to link up to the mind to do that. You see something that's registered as a perception in the mind, then that perception in the mind generates a feeling. For example, the other day I was outside and somebody was walking along with nice big boots. It was raining, the ground was muddy, so when I saw the big boots, they looked really good to me. I looked at those boots and felt the sense of assurance, comfort, dry feet, and I thought, those boots are great. I want a pair. Now imagine you go to your room, take your clothes off, put those boots on, and jump in a shower. Do those boots look interesting to you? Don't you think, what an idiot. It feels completely out of touch. What an ugly thing to stick on my feet. Now you call them poor old boots. They're the same boots, but one time they make you look heroic, and another time they make you look like a complete nitwit. The perceptions are different. The eyes see the same thing, but the mind adds its interpretations. A lot happens around that, over fashions, styles, what's attractive, what's unattractive, what clothes are attractive, what body shapes are attractive, and so on. What really happens is just that the eyes see shapes and colors, and the mind creates around it. You may be really passionate and desperate to make sure that your clothing style or your body shape is in line with what people are saying is good this time around, and that's going to change every year. What was number one last year, which you spent 150 quid on buying, well, next year that's out, so you spend another 150 quid on buying the next lot of gear. This is the way it goes because of mental nuance. Isn't it good just to see things as they are? Shape is shape, color is color. Looking at things simply in terms of their function gives you a little bit of independence from the world. Boots are for keeping your feet dry. You don't need them in the shower, so take them off, that's all. The other place where feeling arises is the body. The eyes don't feel, the ears don't feel, the tongue doesn't feel, the nose doesn't feel, but the body does feel. What the Buddha is saying here is that there's a kind of feeling that arises in association with physical contact, a touch or even inferred touch. For example, when you see something, you think, oh, it would be nice to stroke that. We become aware of the feeling and of the particular energies that happen around it. We want to bond to it or hold it if it's a pleasant feeling, and we want to shrink from it if it's unpleasant. That's what is meant by worldly feeling or feeling associated with flesh. Feeling not associated with flesh is mental feeling, and particularly in this instance, it refers to the mental feeling which is derived or nuanced from the sense doors, but nuanced from itself. It refers to the mental feeling which isn't derived or nuanced from the sense doors, but nuanced from itself. If it's not based upon a sight, a sound, or a touch, what is the mind's own feeling? Intentionality is one of them. If I feel a sense of honesty or generosity arising in myself, that has come from the mind, and I feel a bit brighter. The Buddha says these are very important bases of feelings to track because you have some say over them. You don't have much say over sights, sounds, and touches, but you do have say over intentionality, courage, patience, generosity, loving kindness, and compassion. So you should not ignore this base of feeling. In fact, you should indulge in it. You should spoil yourself with it, because this will help to redress the balance. You won't need feeling from touch and visual inferences. You'll feel quite happy and clear, independently of them. There are also the mental feelings associated with the different states of mind. When mental consciousness is refined, sensitive, light, and open, then it has a pleasant feeling with it. But when it is aggressive and forceful, the feeling is unpleasant. Again, seek your own welfare. Indulge, don't be afraid. Get as much good feeling as you can. Through calm, brightness, generosity, and deep attention, you're going to find a basis for feeling that will bring enough satisfaction in itself. Sights and sounds will just be seen as wallpaper. They won't matter that much anymore. Then you have a place where you are a little more independent from the constructed world, and that's the basis from which renunciation can happen. The cream of meditation is when you're starting to go past the rough stuff, when the system is clogged, tightened up, dull, and groggy. You go into it, and it begins to flow. You have some say over it. I can calm, I can ease, I can bless, I can forgive, I can love, I can be clear. Any of these intentions and mind states are going to support agreeable feeling. You notice them as they are. You notice how they arise. You have some say over generating them. You also notice that they are constructed. Therefore, you don't cling to them. If you think, I have to have these beautiful mind states, I am them, why don't I have them? It's because you identify with the idea that I'm supposed to be blissed out and cheerful all the time. But you can recognize that these states are not given, that you have to do some work to develop them. You have to do this deep, intimate, very sincere, and honest work of disengaging the basis of stress, agitation, panic, demand, and defeat that generate so much unpleasant mental feeling. The pressures, the stresses, the demands, things being out of control and the feeling of being overwhelmed are the plight of the average person. You are in a system that is whirling away and you're floundering to try to catch up with it, and you never win. At the end of the day, there's still more to do and you feel defeated. So you're more or less forced out into the senses to provide yourself with the requisite of agreeable feeling. I hope it's not too bad for you. I can feel extremely difficult at times for some people. They end up so defeated that they just drink themselves to death or kill themselves because they feel they can't be around anymore. Meditation should touch into the stiffness of the system and come through it. Really aim for that. Don't get too strapped down by the techniques that I do or that other people do or that you read about in books, because for you they're abstract, they're ideas. There's no way I can bring the Buddha's teachings across except through words and ideas. Maybe I could embody it a bit, but that would be an inference. Along with an inference could come certain unintended suggestions such as, you should do this, you should feel this, you should be able to do this. Why aren't you getting that? What's wrong with you? This is not what I'm implying, but something in you might interpret my words and actions in these ways. Whenever we set up something abstract, we have to be aware of what the mind does with it. We are very much under the tyranny of the abstract, the tyranny of numbers. Whenever we start to do something, we go into the performance tyranny. Get to the top of the class as quickly as possible. No dawdling. We generate mild panic. The average state of a city dweller, I suggest, is sustained, manageable panic. There is a constant urge to rush to the next thing, and at the end of the day, feeling that there is still 5 other things to do. Those mental nuances are not just in the mind, because what the mind feels, the body feels. What the body feels, the mind feels. Their relationship is like that. What you feel in your mind is going to hit in your body. What you feel in your body is going to affect your mind. When I say mind, I don't mean your thinking. I mean your heart, your awareness, your sense of who you are. Another thing we can recognize about feeling, however poignant it may be, is that it's innately mutable. It's shifting. That's its nature. And that's also the case for the clinging to it that occurs. The mind, as you've probably recognized, doesn't stay still for a second. It's a continual wave formation with patterns, senses, moods, dreams, images, instincts, intuitions, spaces, and densities, all kinds of textures and tones. Sometimes in meditation we can experience states that we don't even have words for. It goes deeper than emotion. We may think, what is this gray, grisly fog that I've been sitting in? Or, I feel like a pot of lukewarm glue with lumps in it. You're reading what's happening on the bodily sense. What the mind feels and the body feels, and it's very changeable, simply with a word, with a smile, with a burst of sunshine. Why does something in us seem so stuck? When you feel a mind state of anxiety, there's an unpleasant feeling that stays there, sometimes for a lifetime. You don't really know what anxiety means because you're always in it. Your body has firmed up the mental signal. First, the body encapsulates, takes a photograph of the mental signs, not a visual photograph, but a bodily impression. Then the body begins to adopt those patterns, those mental feelings, perceptions, and signals as the norm. This is how I am. You can't even judge it because you're in it all the time. You don't have any place to see it from until you see somebody else and realize that he doesn't operate the same way I do. I know people who feel guilty about everything. If they can't find anything to feel guilty about, they feel guilty they're not feeling guilty enough. I don't know what generated that, but some of these emotional patterns, I would suggest, get embedded very early through the fundamental signals that you receive as you come into life. Whatever your mother, your father, and the world around you are carrying gets into you. Most of it is good, some of it is not. This stuff is not absolutely fixed, but it can be rather stuck. In a social environment, we have lots of signals about urgency, accomplishment, going places, failing to be good enough, and so on. All these signals get embodied into a tense bodily pattern, which is then adopted. That's the clinging. You don't decide, oh, here is some panic, I think I'll cling to that. It clings. It's more accurate to say that there are bases affected by clinging, but there's nobody clinging. You don't have to feel guilty about clinging. You have to recognize that there's the experience of cleaving to, holding to, tightening up around, rejecting, forcing away, believing in a mental pattern as being myself. That's actually not me. That's a program, sankhara. With some investigation, encouragement, sustained attention, and appropriate intentionality, it's possible to change the programming. When the clinging, at least to the really defective stuff, is not happening, we can adopt something wholesome. As you become more satisfied and secure, you also become looser and more free. You realize, okay, I can be with unpleasant feelings without getting stuck in them. I can be doing it wrong without going into a whole tribunal about it. I can handle people not liking me without going into a huge fault-finding mission or defending myself. If you're looking to change other people's perceptions of you, it's going to be a long road, isn't it? All you can do is gradually clear the anxiety and bring up the skillful intention. May I be well, may you be well. The primary way of deconstructing clinging is right there, as so many things are, but we skip over it. It's what is called right intent, the intent of goodwill, the intent of compassion, and the intent of letting go of the sense world, not rejecting it, but being more careful not to buy into it, not feeling you have to follow its signals. It's called renunciation, which may sound heavy, but means restraining, gathering yourself back into the center. It's a pleasant experience. It's not associated with ill will or ideology. If it weren't for your welfare, didn't make you feel better, and wasn't true, the Buddha wouldn't have taught it. It's only because it's like this, and that you can do it, that he taught it. I think I'll end there.